largely interchangeable. The political and financial alliances between bankers and presidents and their cabinets defined, and continue to define, the policies and laws that drive the economy. My research shows that the revolving doors between public and private service weren't created in the 1980s, as many more recent works claim. They were always present. I approached this project from two angles. For each president and Treasury Secretary, I noted the 6 biggest bankers of the time. For the most part, the number of significant political ties trailed off after that point, and cross-referenced them with the 6 banks whose legacies snaked through that Morgan Bank meeting in October 1929. In most cases, the top 6 bankers of the time were related to the men in that room and possessed broad alliances with the presidents and their teams. I examined archival connections and correspondence to determine the nature of their alliances. In some periods, only 1 or 2 bankers dominated the alliances and had the most influence, just as some firms seemed to corner the market at certain times. All the President's Bankers is a story of relationships between powerful men. It is the financial political history of America, and it reveals not only how these alliances shaped America's domestic and foreign policy, but also, by extension, how America's bankers shaped the world, and America's position as a superpower. Between the 1930s and 1960s, the bankers who most influenced presidents were on close personal terms with them. They influenced policy to suit themselves, to be sure, but in the post-war world, that worked well for the population. In the 1970s, the nature of these alliances changed. Bankers now had a fresh source of power, the ability to recycle Middle East petrodollars and expand into Latin America. The memories of the war and the Depression and the sense of public spirit had receded. By the 1970s, bankers like David Rockefeller and Walter Wriston were pushing Presidents Nixon and Carter to do their bidding absent the kind of authentic personal ties that bound former bankers to former presidents. This more selfish stance solidified through the 1980s and 1990s, when the notion of U.S. banks being competitive with strengthening European and Japanese banks paved the way for a spate of banking deregulation and enhanced banker power that extends through today. Personal connections became merely opportunistic ones. Democratic President Bill Clinton and Republican President George W. Bush selected Goldman CEOs in the form of Robert Rubin and Hank Paulson, respectively, to run the Treasury Department and network with the private bankers. Lobbyists and lawyers interacted more frequently with administration staff. Campaign donations took the place of discourse about issues. The results of policy decisions might have been the same anyway. As for the archival records, all of the National Archives and Records Administration libraries, for FDR through Carter, have exceedingly accessible and well-organized information with consistent classifications. They were a pleasure to peruse, and I lost myself for days in all of them. After Reagan took office, records became less available. At the Clinton Library in Little Rock, Arkansas, I learned that some records may never be uncovered without the benefit of Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, requests, not merely for national security reasons. As years go on, the number of redactions in documents rise anyway, but because the commitment to organize such a vast amount of material is not what it was before the 1980s. As such, the bulk of information that might be revealed by the FOIA requests that I filed at the Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Clinton libraries is not available yet. What remains to be examined by some curious person years from now is the nature of George W. Bush's and Barack Obama's relationships with the leading bankers of their day. We may never know the specifics of the discussions that were conducted. Bankers don't put much in writing anymore, and there have been no tapes of White House conversations since Nixon. But we can be sure of one thing. Those bankers and their firms are the financial descendants of the men at that Morgan meeting in 1929. And decades from now, they still will be. On this, history is clear. Introduction. When the President needed the bankers. This country has nothing to fear from the crooked